This afternoon, we are joined by Ronee DeCanio, who is a candidate for House 97 down in Colleton and Dorchester Counties. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And I have a little smidgen of Berkeley, too.
Okay. Well, very good. Yeah, we want to include our friends in Berkeley as well.
Absolutely.
Well, we want to start by letting our members get to know about you. And so if you would, share a little bit about your personal and professional backgrounds and how those have shaped your views on the importance of education in South Carolina.
Well, I was an adult ed teacher. Now, some people kind of poo-poo that because they think, well, that's not important. But let me tell you, that's because you've never taught adults. And specifically, most of the time, I was teaching DSS recipients. Now, even the children that our teachers teach have backstories. Not all of them, but some of them, and some of them are terrible backstories. Well, you can imagine with DSS recipients, they certainly have backstories. And they're also raising children. The program I worked in, they had to have children to get into the program. And I can remember one student having a child with cerebral palsy, plus a few others. So they have children to raise. They're in school for the entire day, and a little bit longer than our school system here. And they're navigating the Department of Social Services, which we know has issues. So they're trying to keep their lives together, get an education, get off welfare. I taught office skills, get off welfare and get a job. That was it. From day one in September, that's what I told them. This is our goal. This is your goal, but it's my goal. And I must say it was successful because they could see, and I could point out, this is where you want to be, not here with a check hanging over your head. So that's what I did. As far as professionally, my own life, I went to elementary school, high school, taught by nuns, so it was private school. Those nuns, I hate to thank them publicly, but my goodness, I had an excellent education, and also my brother and sister were in private school. That education enabled me to become a teacher. And I also taught other people, not just DSS students. I taught other people, but become a teacher, become a novelist, become a TV host, work in all branches as an administrative assistant. I was a paralegal. I worked in corporate with finance and publishing, all kinds of things. And I was an entrepreneur. I owned some small businesses. So that education got me there. I had also a good family background. That always helps. You know, they're all gone now, my parents and my brother and sister, but we were very typical Italian families. So, you know, those are extended too. You're not raised by your parents, you're raised by everybody. But that's a good thing. That we've lost some of that, I think. So, I'd like to bring some of that to South Carolina, not the Italian part necessarily, but to my values in teaching. I think it's so important. I think we have to do something. I don't care if they say we're 43, 46, 47, 48. Those numbers are all bad. We have got to raise that level. We have to. We're out of time. And please understand, I'm not picking on South Carolina. Many states have this same problem. Got to do something.
Sure.
I have some idea.
Well, I just a personal editorial. If you want to bring the Italian part of cooking, please do. By all means, bring that along. But your point about, rankings, whether it's 43, 46, 48, that has been a priority for the General Assembly in the last two sessions as they've looked at quote unquote educational reform. And both chambers have passed some version of educational reform, but they haven't agreed on a version yet. So in the coming session, it's likely that education reform is going to be right back on the table. So if elected to the General Assembly, what do you consider to be the most important and essential elements of educational reform to move out of the 43 to 48 range that you were talking about?
Well, first, I'd like to go back a little bit to teaching because for 2 straight years, I taught the DSS recipients. I knew I had to change things up a little bit. This is what I did. I taught with modules. I know it's being done in other places, but I don't believe it's being done here, not to my knowledge. And what I did, and it wasn't my idea, I cannot take credit for this. What I did was I spent a whole summer and I'm not suggesting the teachers give up their summers to do this. There's other ways, but I did spend a whole summer typing modules. There was a module for every subject, and I allowed my students to pick and choose. They could come in every morning or afternoon and decide what they were going to work on. Could be one module, could be several. At the end of every chapter, the chapters were based, the modules were obviously based on chapters in a book. We all had books. They would read through the module. Sometimes it was computer work, sometimes it was what I would call business math. They would have to take a test at the end of every chapter. I gave them 3 shots at 90%. Goes back. Now they're doing those tests in front of me, so I know if there's any cheating or anything going on, but they were terrific, I must say. There was none of that. So they had to take a test and hand it in. If it was anything under 90, they got it back and I said, try again. Come on, read that chapter again. That's what I taught in modules. It was not my idea. I did get it from a high school teacher. He had the same exact curriculum that I had. And he said, really, you're knocking yourself out and we have the same curriculum. Do that. Why don't you try this? And I loved it. I thought, here's our problem with teaching, not teachers, with teaching. You have basically 3 areas. You have the top students who grasp things within a second. Really smart. I don't know if they're smart, they just grasp things better. I was terrible in math and became a bookkeeper. So there's no rhyme or reason to what happens when you're a child and you go into real life. Then you have the middle. And then you have the students who can't grasp, maybe not everything, maybe a few things. If everyone has strengths and weaknesses. Some people, I'm a morning person, maybe the students are better in the morning or less in the afternoon. So most teachers, I would venture, teach to the middle. Otherwise, how else could you do it? You're going to lose a certain amount. So you have the students who grasp it very quickly. So let them go. They can do it on their own time in their own way. And of course, there has to be a lot of extra work for those. You want to keep them busy and you want to keep them engaged. So there has to be credible extra work so they're not interfering and pulling clown in the class. But it also allowed me to sit with the ones who weren't grasping it. They could come up to my desk in the front, maybe 1, maybe 2, and say, we're just stymied. And I could sit with them one-on-one and explain it. To me, that made perfect sense. You're teaching to a whole group of very, very children, again, with varied backgrounds, with varied problems. I don't understand how you can do that. And another thing, I'll bring this up again later with companies. We have gotten so much industry here. It's terrific. But one of the things that companies do in their due diligence work before they commit to coming into a state, one thing they want in the criteria, there's numerous ones, they want good schools, because most of the time, maybe not all the time, but most of the time, they bring in their own executives and lower management people. And they want to know, they want to be ensured we have good housing, but they want good schools for their children. Having an excellent school system, to answer the first question, ensures we have employable people. And that ensures we have a healthy economy. I think it's really that simple.
Well, the kind of competency-based instructional model you were just describing is obviously very teacher-driven and teacher-centered, which is exciting, but it also requires that we have highly qualified teachers in our classrooms, and our state's experiencing a crisis of teachers leaving the profession and not enough individuals entering the profession. So if elected as a member of the General Assembly, what steps would you push forward to help our state better recruit and retain top teaching talent?
Well, you know what I'm going to say first. We have to give them a living wage. In South Carolina and other states, they're not getting a living wage. A member of my HOA and we were in a meeting, and she was a teacher for many years, and she said, you know, I spend $1,000 a year on resources. I was shocked. I mean, I didn't know what teacher, I didn't have to do that back in the day. And then when I actually worked in your school system as an after-school counselor, and one of our young counselors had just graduated, and she was looking forward to being a new teacher in August, pre-pandemic. And she mentioned one day she was getting married, and she said, you know, I put aside money. I said, oh, for the wedding. And she said, well, a little bit, but I'm putting $40, either a paycheck or a month, I forgot how it went, toward my resources for my children when I start teaching. And I was thinking, what? You're putting money away? Now, we got a broken system here and it has to be fixed. Come on. How are you ever going to entice people, new teachers to come in if you're not going to pay them for it? How are you going to retain them? Apparently they're leaving. Too many are leaving and going into private industry because they can earn more. You can't have that. I mean, you just can't. So yes, I will fight for teacher pay. Having been there, I know how bad it could be. I was actually a per diem person. They wouldn't even put me under contract. So it wasn't so easy either. But I can tell you that they're struggling, and that's not fair. We can't expect them to be teachers, and they have the most precious commodity we have in their hands. They have the future of our country. So let's be clear about who they're teaching. And their mommies and their daddies to them, and their nurses, there are lots of things, and counselors. So we can't afford to do that. We have to give them a living wage. We have to give them money for resources, whether you call it grants, irrelevant, as long as they're not paying for it. That's how you attract new people. So, I mean, why would I become a teacher if I have to go and get a second job or a third job or work all summer doing something else? And of course, there's always that little thing. I see it on social media. God bless social media, right? Such an education. Well, they only work, they don't work full time. They only work a couple of hours, or so many hours a day, and then they have summers off, and they have, oh, really? Well, you better go to that school and you watch them, because I took over when they stopped as a counselor, and you would see them working quite late in the day in their classrooms or at meetings. And honestly, some of them just looked exhausted. They looked exhausted. And I can understand why. Kids aren't that easy to teach. And what did parents just find out during the pandemic? Well, I know what they found out. Holy moly. You have one child to teach, or maybe two, and possibly three, maybe different grades. How would you like 30? How would you like 30? And expect them to be just wonderful and happy that you're not paying them enough, and go home and take care of their own families, perhaps. I'm sure most of them are married, have their own children, have to do maybe homework with their own children, and so on and so forth. That is the only way. We have to do that. And I think the other thing we have to do is we have to start listening to them a little bit. They should be part of a process. I believe that citizens have to be part of every process. So if there's something going on and they want to come up to State House or Senate or wherever, you need to listen to their views. You may not agree with them. Maybe you can't produce the end result of what they want, but at least listen to them. Make them feel like you are. Make them feel like they're valued, that it means something. I don't think we do value them enough. Now, back in the day, again, with nuns, oh yeah, you never went home and told mommy and daddy that you got into trouble. No, never happened. And we don't give our teachers that kind of feeling. We can't have them feel like they have to give up. It's wrong. It's just wrong.
Well, you mentioned a broken system when you were talking about teachers paying out of pocket for supplies. Mm-hmm. I wish I could say that I hadn't heard that kind of story before, but unfortunately it's the reality across our state. And it's in some places far worse than it is in others. We have some pretty substantial inequities across districts. And our General Assembly is tasked with trying to ensure that all children, regardless of zip code, have access to the education they deserve. But we know that's not the reality. So if elected, what steps do you envision pushing for in the General Assembly to create a state educational system that is equitable for all kids across all zip codes?
Well, one thing I want to mention about teachers as well is your retirement system. They call it a defined contribution. That's what they want to go to. That's like the stock market. I mean, are we kidding ourselves? Has no one looked at the stock market? You can't get your pension. You can't get that check every month based on the stock market. So that should be off the table entirely. I'm sorry, but I wouldn't want it. I have Social Security, and I know it comes in. We don't know for how long. They keep threatening, but I know it's there. I know it's there. So to answer your question, I'm trying to think how I should answer you. Well, I think it all revolves around money. And I think we've set up some things, probably in the state as well. But I think it really focuses a little bit more on your school boards and your county. They fund, well, not the school board, but the county funds your schools. I think I'm correct on that. So back in the day, someone took it upon themselves to do this, what is it, Act 388? Well, that's fine. I mean, I moved here because of cheap taxes. And let's be clear, now, I don't want to raise anyone's taxes. I live on a fixed income. So they decided that you would, how does this go? You would, your taxes would not increase, but for 15% every 5 years when they do a reval. And to do that, they said, well, we are not basing your taxes on what your house is actually worth. And we know homes are going up. I live in Somerville. They're based on, they're based on that 15%. That's not going to move. So that eliminates something. Again, I don't want to raise taxes. But I see the problem in money for money, and I see the assembly getting involved. Instead of doing it like we do our budgets, right? We have a budget. I know what bills I have to pay. You know what bills you have to pay, and you know the income for that. Okay, now, maybe you won't have enough, so maybe you go out and get a job. Maybe you draw a little from an IRA if you have one. We have to figure out, we have to go from the inside out. We have to figure out what every student costs us. That's the student, that's the school, repairs, and maintenance, and the teachers, everything. That's a number. Maybe it's $1,000 a student. I don't know that number. Then we have to, just like we do with our budgets, then we have to go out and say, well, how are we going to get this money and how much do we need? Right now, it seems to be a little bit of a hodgepodge coming in, these funding streams. So let's not do that. Let's look at where the money comes from. So in addition, we also have TIFs. I think you know what a TIF is, right? The tax increment finance, where we get people to come in. I've never seen a blighted community in Somerville, but I guess there are. Okay, I'm not arguing that point. But it's an old system where we bring in development and we give them this TIF. It's a tax abatement for 20 to 25 years. So they're not paying taxes. Then the industry comes in and we say, oh, just to entice them, you don't have to pay taxes for any amount of time. Well, why don't we just say, okay, let's say you pay $10,000 to a company a year. How about we give you $8,000 abatement and you get that $2,000, and that's what's going to help fund our schools? Why can't you do that? Do you think that companies are going to say no? I don't, because it's perfect. You have the environment, except if there's a hurricane. We don't say that word. You have the environment, you have land, you have a school system, you have a labor force, you have housing, you have everything you need for a company to come in. So let's fund it. That's two ways of funding it. Let's get people to kick in. Let's get these companies to kick in. And this, I think, really does go to the state. I have, for instance, a huge rural area, St. George and Grover and Ridgeville and Reesville. It's huge. It's huge. Parts of Colleton. Well, their school systems are even lower than ours here in DD2. I think it's DD4. We have all this land. I was in there the other day and I thought, oh my gosh, I've landed on a different, I go all the time, but I've landed on a different planet. There's just land and land. Why aren't we asking businesses and bringing businesses to go in our rural areas? Because the developers would be developing property. We'd have housing. We would bring broadband in. We would improve our school systems in rural areas. That's a biggie. We need to do that. You can't look at Somerville and Charleston and Columbia and say, well, that's just great for our school systems. You have to look at the state, and there's more than my rural area. So let's encourage business to go in rural areas. Then we would have a much better school system statewide than we have now. Right now, it's kind of where you live. You can go, I mean, people I know, they buy homes in certain areas because of the school system in that area.
Well, what you're describing is in some ways school choice by virtue of moving. But school choice has also been in the news a lot recently because of Governor McMaster's decision to use $32 million in federal relief funds to create what he calls a SAFE grant, a private school scholarship program for about 5,000 South Carolina students. Now that's tied up in the court system, but the governor has said in the coming session of the General Assembly, he will ask for the legislature to create a permanent version of his SAFE grants program. So if elected and if that request comes from the governor, what would your position be?
No. I went to private school. My parents paid for it. Of course, back in the day, it wasn't like today, but I think the equivalent of what it would cost today would be pretty fair. My dad was a laborer. My mother worked in a shop. They didn't have a lot of money, but they still did it. Okay, our schools are being too underfunded to fund charter schools and private schools. That's the bottom line. But there's also something you can do about that. Okay. Again, if we can draw in some tax money, and it would have to go through the county, we can then, if it was me, I would say, okay, let's say your taxes are taxpayers' taxes are $1,000 a year. 500 of that is going to go toward the schools. Now, it doesn't right now. Mine are 300 and something that go toward schools. They're part of their their funding stream is investors. This is 4%, 6%. Okay, well, suppose 50% of our taxes go to schools. When this other money comes in from businesses and developers, it goes to the county. So the county then says, well, we have now an abundance of money, so we can allow that. We don't need you to pay us $1,000, however it's listed, county and fire and whatever. You can do that. And if you pay taxes in, especially 50%, 40%, you have a vote in what happens in those schools. I know in other places I've lived, we voted down new tennis courts and lots of things. And they would have to present a budget. It's yay or it's nay. If we thought it was something good, okay, we'll go for it. If we didn't like what was going to be, where the money was going to be used, it was a no, period. So you have a say. But the other thing we can do, if you're doing that, if you're paying it out of your tax-paying money, then let's credit the people who are sending their children to private school. They shouldn't be paying twice. They shouldn't pay for private school and pay for public school. Let's give them credits, or reduce their portion of their taxpayer money. There's ways to do that. I don't want to hurt them. I just don't think that we are funded enough to start throwing money at private schools. And also then becomes like the best students go. Or I mean, I hear it all the time where someone who isn't doing so well, they're still back in public school with the same system. Let's try to equalize things a little bit.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground on a lot of educational topics, but I want to make sure that you have a chance to share anything that we haven't addressed. So is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to make sure our members know before they cast their ballot in November?
Vote. Aside from voting a lot, people say voting is a privilege, it's your right. No, it's your obligation. It's your obligation. This is something we have to do in a democracy that people have died to keep going. So we have to think very carefully. I would love to say don't be partisan, but that's not going to happen. I'm not a partisan person. I don't believe that works. I'm old enough, I should say, watch that. I'm old enough to know what it was like in Washington before this all happened. I'm old enough to see how things were, where they could accomplish things by fighting on the floor and going out for drinks afterwards or barbecues with their families. They're not doing it, but I'm not in Washington. I'm not running for Jamie Harrison's position, not at all. I'm local, but the same thing happens locally. I am not partisan. I believe we reach across the aisle and we come to a consensus for the good of our citizens. We have to always keep that in mind, that we are your stewards, in a way, of everything, money, laws. And also, I'd just like to pitch this, that State House, when I looked it up, what State House laws actually, what they're responsible for, I should say, are pretty amazing. It's every aspect of our lives. You always think of Washington. Well, they're not affecting my life very much, unless they do away with Social Security, in which case I'd have to be protesting. But state does a lot, and your local elections are very important. Maybe in your eyes, not as important as federal. I say in some respects, local politics impact your life, and that's what people are really fighting against. They think they're fighting against Washington, but they're looking at, on a day-to-day basis, how are you going to help me? What are you going to take from me? What are you going to give to me?
Well, we thank you for your willingness to be a steward of our state and for your willing to serve. And thank you for taking the time to share with our members this afternoon.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.